On June 30th, 1849, the air over Rome isn't filled with the romantic scent of ancient history. It's thick with the smell of gunpowder and the thunder of French shells. Inside the city walls, an impossible stand is being made. At the heart of it all stands one man, a legend in the making, Giuseppe Garibaldi. He's a striking figure, cutting a silhouette in his poncho and a wide-brimmed sombrero. He's been commanding the defense of this city, fighting to forge a single, independent Italy. His actions over the last month have been the stuff of myth. He's been seen on the city walls at dawn, calmly smoking as enemy snipers took shots at him. He hosted dinner parties where guests were killed by shrapnel from artillery strikes. But today, he's addressing his troops with a different kind of message. The political leaders, he tells them, have surrendered. The fight for Rome is over. But for him, the war is not. He will not stop. He will take the fight to the mountains and continue a guerrilla war. He looks at his men and lays out the stakes. He offers no pay, no food, no rest, only hunger, cold, forced marches, battles, and death. He says anyone not willing to accept that can stay behind. Then he makes his final electrifying call. He who has the name of Italy not only on his lips but in his heart, let him follow me. And with that, 4,000 men, 4,000 walked with him, because he was Garibaldi, the hero of two worlds. Music swells, then fades. Narrator: it's crazy to think that Giuseppe Garibaldi, the man who would help unite a nation, was 26 years old before he'd even heard of the idea of Italy. He was on his father's merchant ship in Constantinople when he overheard two men talking about a secret society called Young Italy. The conversation went something like this. "What do you mean, Italy?" one man scoffed. "What's Italy?" The other responded. "I mean the new Italy, the united Italy, the Italy of all Italians." To us, that sounds obvious. But 2 centuries ago, the Italian peninsula was a patchwork of small kingdoms, city-states, and republics. They had different economies, different cultures, even different dialects, so distinct they didn't share a common language. The people of Florence had more in common with their French or Austrian neighbors than they did with people from Rome or Venice. They were fine with this because the bigger foreign powers like France and Austria played them against each other, offering protection in exchange for loyalty. The thought of a single unified Italy was just a vague dream. Then came a hero, and he wasn't Italian. He was Napoleon Bonaparte. Yeah, Napoleon was born in Corsica. He came to Italy in 1796, leading a French army that conquered the peninsula, threw out the local rulers, and expelled the Pope. He then carved it up into 3 parts, ruled by his family members. In doing so, he achieved what no one had. He united all of Italy in hating him. But here's the twist. While he treated the Italian states like exploited colonies, he also brought modernization, things like street lighting and upgraded sewer systems. He replaced the old guard priests in government for career civil servants. Napoleon gave the Italian people 2 things they'd never had: a common enemy and a taste of the Enlightenment. When Napoleon was finally defeated, the great powers of Europe met at the Congress of Vienna and put everything back the way it was, restoring the minor kings and making Austria the dominant power. And those kings? They rolled back everything Napoleon had done, even the streetlights and sewers. This was the world Garibaldi was born into in 1807. His hometown had been part of France for most of his childhood before being handed back to the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia. His family was poor, but they got him into a church school so he could get an education and escape the difficult life of a sailor. It was that education that allowed him to grasp the big ideas of freedom and nationalism he heard about with Young Italy, and he was already politically aware. On a previous voyage, his father's ship had transported a socialist radical who talked about social reform, women's equality, and destigmatizing sexuality. So when Garibaldi heard about Young Italy, he was all in. He found the founder, Giuseppe Mazzini, who was in exile after a failed uprising. Garibaldi pledged his support to Mazzini's dream of a free, independent, republican nation. Mazzini had a job for him: go to Genoa, join the Navy, and start recruiting. When Mazzini gave the word,
Garibaldi would lead a mutiny. Garibaldi did exactly that, but when the time came, the mutiny lasted only a few hours. The main rebel army was crushed almost instantly. With a death sentence on his head, Garibaldi had no choice but to go on the run. He bounced around as a sailor, doing small acts of rebellion wherever he could. He was like a real-life firefly, smuggling activists back to Italy. When he heard there were opportunities in Brazil, he moved to Rio de Janeiro. But he was still restless, so he decided to join a war, specifically the Ragamuffin War of 1835. This was a rebellion by a southern province against Brazil's central government. The region was basically cowboy country, and the locals, called gauchos, raised cattle. But the central government had made trade deals that made imported beef so cheap it tanked the local economy. For Garibaldi, a man who loved an underdog, the pull was irresistible. He showed up and offered to be a naval commander, even though he had no ship, no crew, besides a couple of other Italian guys, and no access to a port. The rebels, impressed by his confidence, gave him a letter of marque, essentially making him a privateer. And he figured it out. He couldn't get a ship from a port, so he built 2 large ones on land, slapped giant wheels on them, and used dozens of cattle to pull them to the sea. He began fighting the Brazilian Navy, capturing 14 vessels over the next few years. But it was when he was scouting a port town he planned to take that he saw the prize he wanted most. Through his telescope, he spotted her, a woman. He immediately lowered a boat and rowed ashore. Her father invited him in for coffee. Her name was Anita, and she was 18 years old. She was of mixed Portuguese and indigenous heritage, raised in the gaucho culture. She was resilient, full of life, and a talented rider and shooter. Garibaldi, at 32, was instantly smitten. His first words to her were, "You should be mine," and apparently she agreed. The only small problem was that she was already married, but that didn't stop her. She left with him to go off to war, and she never stayed behind the lines. Garibaldi joined Anita in the front ranks of every battle. She drew her sword, commanded men in combat, and fought beside him. This romantic image of them fighting by day and loving by night made them the most famous couple in the world. They cut a swashbuckling path across South America and back toward Garibaldi's beloved Italy. And Anita wasn't just bringing a sword to battle, she was also carrying Garibaldi's baby. Their exploits only get wilder from here. But for now, that's the story of how a sailor from a small Italian port became the legendary hero who would one day unite a nation.